I decided to attend the Oulipolooza celebration, I didn't realize that my attendance entailed a performance. I found out that the performance was subject to one explicit constraint. It should not last more than 7 minutes. That's the kind of constraint I will observe. It's a generic constraint, not an Oulipolooza constraint or an Oulipian constraint, because it's external and it's not textually generative. But it's a constraint all the same, and I like it. A few years ago, when I was 20, I even wrote a thesis on Raymond Queneau, the first writer I read who explicitly discussed a literature born of constraints. I loved all of his stuff, in particular his novels, which I still teach every year or two, and above all, the novel that's become my favorite, I don't know if you know it, a novel called Loin de Rueil in French, The Skin of Dreams in English, a kind of epic about dreams, movies, and the small wingless insects of the orders Malophaga and Anoplura, which we usually call lice. Interestingly, perhaps, it's not easy to discover the constraints governing this novel, and even less easy to establish whether the novel follows them. Queneau made it a point in his fiction to conceal his self-imposed limits and rules. And also he loved to joke. And I think that he often claimed to have followed various strict rules, but that it was only a claim. Sometime after reading Queneau, I read Perret, and I should say in passing, I don't know if you know this, but Warren Mott was a student at Penn, wrote a dissertation on Perret, which was the first sustained reflection on that writer in English. I read Perret, Les Choses, La Disparition, the famous novel without a letter, without the vowel E, Les Revenantes, the less famous novel with only the vowel E, and so on and so forth. Perret too enjoyed good jokes about constraints. Queneau, Perret, Borges and Pierre Menard, but also Léon Bopp and his Jacques Arnaud et la Somme romanesque, a kind of excessive novelistic encyclopedia approximating the idea of a novel made up of novels. This Swiss writer, who was born in 1896 and died in 1977, earned a doctorate from the Sorbonne with a thesis on the Swiss diarist Amiel, wrote thousands of pages, became an interesting philosopher. He's the founder of catalogism, the logic and science of and power of lists, of kata. Catalogism, a splendid critic. He wrote the most remarkable sketch for a treatise on the novel, and a commentary on Madame Bovary, which prefigures Roland Barthes' SZ. And today he's very unjustly neglected. In Jacques Arnaud, the protagonist, who writes traditional and harmonious novels, or as he says, syrupy platitudes, decides to break with his literary past in order to write the novelistic summa he's been dreaming about for a long time. Inspired by a work on the novel in which he attempted to set the repertory of the main spirits themes and styles usable in fictional works, Arnaud devotes a book to each of the six spirits, the six spiritual attitudes or ways of seeing he has chosen for their utmost importance: folly, hatred, weakness, strength, love, wisdom. Léon Bop's text presents the six novels making up Jacques Arnaud's Summa in the shape of experimental narratives or summaries thereof. Wisdom, for instance, well before Butor's A Change of Heart or Pérec's The Man Who Sleeps, is a narrative in the second person. But Bop's text is above all a fiction on the powers of fiction that is constrained by various kinds of spirits, attitudes, stylistic modes, and so on. All of these writers, particularly Léon Bop, inspired me. I rewrote Ring Lardner's short story Champion, you may know it, in the shape of an index to the original edition, and I wrote 3 novels that even Léon Bop did not explicitly envisage. The stupidest novel in the world, it wasn't that difficult for me to do, but I could never find a publisher. An Oedipo novel in which the protagonist kills his mother and marries his father, and a novel using the some 73,000 words defined by the 1959 Petit Larousse, a novel I entitled Salle, Bear, Yon, Roche, because of the 4 syllables which, according to the Soviet linguist Marr, are at the basis of all language. The last 2 novels I mentioned didn't find a publisher. I also wrote some constraint-bound essays and commentaries. In particular, in my Guide du Roman, my guide to the French novel 1901-1950, I wrote plot summaries in rhymed alexandrines, in the form of recipes, and in dialogue form. This, for instance, for Proust's Remembrance of Things Past. I don't know if you know the novel. I'm sure you haven't read it all. Here it is. Here is the summary. Marcel, I think that's what his name is. The one who was always going to bed early? Yes, he wants to become a writer. And it's taking him a really long time. And I wrote an entire article, including the title, my name, and my university affiliation, in the form of questions. But my 7 minutes are up, and this will have to be another story.